I'll have to Madam Director, do you have any public comments for items not on the agenda?
I do not see any members of the public present.
If there are, okay, no public comments, then we're going to move on to item 4, approval of the minutes of the CAC's regular meeting on November 1, 2022. Has everybody had a chance to look through the minutes? And if so, do we have a motion to approve or do we have proposed changes? Patrick, I'll forward it to you. Do I have a motion? Was that Molly?
Yes.
Do I have a second to approve?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Hearing none, that passes. Patrick, I just sent you the email with the agenda, so hopefully you've got that. And while Patrick's trying to looking for that, let's go on into the administrative reports. And I believe that this is Director Bernstein.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I can start with my Executive Director's report. I think normally we start with the CAC member reports. Does anybody have any reports they would like to share?
Just if you could just raise your hand or unmute yourself. Andy, go ahead and go.
Thank you. So just a couple quick updates. So in Davis was last month, the city council voted to keep the open street on G Street in downtown between 2nd and 3rd permanent, and also move ahead with now that also opens the door to making that, since that's permanent, it can be set up to be more of a permanent open street with things like better ADA access and permanent outdoor seating and stuff like that. So that should become a nicer area, and just a couple of blocks from line 42 up on 5th Street there. So it should be a nice transit accessible destination for people to enjoy. Also, Unitrans, I believe it was back in December. So since our last meeting, now they're accepting the zip pass for payment, just like Yolo bus and SAC RT. So again, that's good news, making it easier to pay to ride transit, both easy to get to Davis, and then once you're within Davis, easy to get around on Unitrans as well. And then finally, so I had been on the Unitrans Advisory Committee, but now I've switched over to the Bicycling Transportation and Street Safety Commission here. And our next meeting is a week from Thursday. I believe that's February 9th at 5:30. And then I believe it's in March, we're going to in-person meetings. So that should be exciting.
Thank you. Big things happening over there in Davis. Are there other updates? Seeing none, then let's move on to Executive Director's report.
Great, thanks, Madam Chair. A couple of things I will note. Just today, we got a signed term sheet from the Federal Highway Administration for our YOTC project. That's our Yolo Active Transportation Corridors project that Brian, who's here, is leading. That project, we've been sort of just twiddling our thumbs, waiting for FHWA to approve the final paperwork. There's still, Caltrans needed to sign it. There's a few more hoops that we need to jump through, but we're really looking forward to getting that project started. We have selected a consultant team led by Farron Piers, and the Center for Regional Change at UC Davis is also a part of that. So we're ready to get going, and very excited that we finally have clearance. So you'll be hearing more about that project moving forward in the coming months. As well, we're deep in doing service planning for our new Woodland Micro Transit service, and we currently have a couple of surveys on the street. One is a general Woodland Transit survey, and then another one that is, Woodland Travel survey, and then a second survey that is specific to current riders of our 211 and 212, our local services in Woodland, to get their input. And we're also going through a branding exercise to rebrand all of our microtransit services. It's called currently the urban rural connections, or Your Ride. And so we're looking at a brand that can a bit more modern kind of, and one that can kind of encompass more urban as well as rural type services. And so that's happening now, and we're planning to bring a service plan for the Woodland service, as well as kind of branding and other information to our board in March. And then the last thing I'll note is that it is a Transit Equity Day. Rosa Parks' birthday is coming up on February 4th, and we're going to be offering free rides throughout our service on that day. So with that, I'll leave it at that. And I know we're going to be talking about both the Route 42 and the Interstate 80 project are on the agenda. So I won't share any updates on those, because you're going to get more on that in the meeting ahead.
Great. Can you give us a little bit of a look at the long range calendar, just a kind of an update on that?
Sure. I believe that is in your packet. Let me just scroll to it. Apologies. So coming up, as I mentioned, in March. Thank you, Heather. Oh, Heather said I can add her as a panelist. Okay, maybe her computer is working again. Okay, we'll see if that works. I know Heather does has the slide deck. I know hopefully it starts working and she can share the slide deck.
Oh, I see hope, because I see her name.
Yes, that's promising. So you were asking about the long range calendar. So a couple items to just highlight in March. As I mentioned, we'll be talking about our Woodland microtransit service plan and potentially our fixed route service changes. There's Heather. Hooray. As well, we'll be kind of kicking off our strategic planning workshop. We're looking at developing a 10-year strategic plan this year. Patrick, your kid is so cute. Hi. And we're also going to be working on our zero emission bus rollout plan. So those are all kind of things that are kind of queued up for the spring. Yeah, as mentioned, we're excited to be kicking off Yolo Active Transportation Corridors project finally. And then we'll be getting into budget season in May. Kind of May, we'll be bringing to you our draft budget that's going to be going to the board for approval in June. So there's just a quick look ahead, but there's lots more for the year ahead if you take a look at the long range calendar on page 9 of your packet.
Yep, for those who have looking forward, it's item 5. Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate it. That takes us into CAC meeting dates for 2023. And is someone?
Yeah, Heather, did you want to take this item or shall I?
Oh, I am trying to share my screen now. 1 minute. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, excellent.
So except for Tuesday, June 21st, these look like they're the first week of the month. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And I think the thinking on the reason that June 1 is different is because the first Tuesday in July is 4th of July.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. Gonna open it up for questions from the first. I should ask, is there any public comment on this item?
I see Steve has his hand raised.
Steve is a committee member.
But there's no public comment at this time.
Okay, with that, Steve, you got your hand raised.
Yes.
Oh.
I'm puzzled about the Zoom meeting, as Andy mentioned earlier. One of the city meetings he's going to is going to go in person next month. My stint on the City of Davis Planning Commission got extended to June because of the district elections, and we're also going in March starting to meet. And another county agency I'm a part of, the In-Home Support Service Advisory Committee, is also going live in March. So state law is changing, I believe, and I don't know if your agency can continue to meet in Zoom or not. So that's my basic question.
Yeah.
So if I could tee up, and then I'm gonna call on the director. Director Bernstein and I had a conversation about this. And the state law is changing, but as an advisory committee, the rules are slightly different as I understand it. This would only really have us adopt a calendar. And if we want to have a discussion about how we'd like to hold those meetings, we can agendize that for the next meeting. And with that, I'm going to turn it over for anything that I missed to the director.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's right. My understanding when I've spoken to our council about it, and our council works for the county, they've told us that our advisory committees can continue to meet remotely at their discretion. But again, that even with the change in state law that's coming up next month, or the deadline that's coming up next month. So that's our understanding now. I understand, like, it seems like different jurisdictions have different ideas about that. But certainly if the committee wants to meet in person, we're happy to do the meetings in person. But I think that is something that we could discuss it now. I don't know that the committee actually needs to take an action. I think we could make that determination, in consultation with council, and then kind of make a decision with the chair. I don't know that we actually need the committee to take action on whether or not it's a Zoom or in-person meeting. So yeah.
And I think for right now, if we can just adopt the calendar and unless there's a burning desire to take it up tonight, we can actually see how the landscape goes at the next meeting. But Olin, you have your hand up, so.
Yes, just an FYI, I have a conflict on September 5th. I won't be able to attend that meeting. And that's okay. I'm not upset about that necessarily, but I would like to attend if possible, if there's any flexibility in the scheduling.
Thanks, Olin. Other comments from other members? Andy.
Thank you. I believe just regarding the topic of in-person meetings, and I agree that's something we definitely don't need to decide tonight. But just out of curiosity, I know that the board has been I believe they've had some in-person meetings, but haven't been able to attend those. So I'm curious just how those have been so far.
Yeah, they have had, I believe, just one in-person meeting, which was in December. And then the January meeting was intended to be in person, but because it was right in the middle of the flooding situation, and so in consultation with the Office of Emergency Services, they recommended that we either reschedule the meeting or make it a remote meeting. And so we made it a remote meeting. But it was nice. Everybody seemed to enjoy seeing each other in December. And I think everybody's looking forward to seeing each other again in February. I'll put it that way.
Olin.
Madam Chair, I'm just curious about the attorney's comments to YCTD about meeting in public. I serve on two other county committees. And in both cases, different attorneys different county council attorneys have said that unless there's unusual circumstances, that in person is required. Once the governor's emergency proclamation is not renewed, and at this point anyway, everyone seems to expect the governor not to renew unless things change.
And I appreciate that. I think we will bring that item back on at the March meeting, and we'll see if we have more solid information at that time. Are there any other folks who have schedule conflicts besides Olin with the calendar right now? Seeing none. Director Bernstein and members of the CAC, is there any ability or appetite to change the September 5th meeting to accommodate Olin's schedule?
I'm open to going to the 12th or some other Tuesday.
And I have a conflict as well on the 12th, Steve.
Oh, okay.
Both the 5th and the 12th would be out for me, but August is open.
We would need to move the meeting earlier, not later, in order to kind of keep with our intention of having this meeting happen before the board meeting so that we can inform items that are on the board agenda. So it would have to move to later at the last week in August.
And I will have schedule conflicts either on both sides of that because I have one in August and another for planning commission in the third week of September. So I don't think I could do that.
Can we do a different day of the week, Monday, Wednesday, or Thursday?
If it's the committee's desire to accommodate a different meeting, we can do a survey and bring it back. I might suggest that the committee could adopt the other meeting dates and then direct staff to do a doodle poll or something for the September meeting.
I appreciate that. I think that's wise. Olin, you have a comment?
So moved.
Second.
Any additional discussion? So we're clear, we're proposing to adopt the CAC meeting dates of March 7th, May 1st, June 27th, and November 7th. And we will do a survey to look at some alternate dates that will work for the committee for the meeting of September 5th. Is that what I understand we're voting on?
Yes.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? We got a schedule. Congratulations, everybody. Autumn, can you add to the March calendar the remote meeting discussion?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. That takes, oh, pardon?
I'll just make one note, which is that if there is a determination that we do need to meet in person, we may have to kind of make that decision unilaterally without the committee's input. If that's the determination that the law is we can no longer meet via Zoom, then we would do that. But otherwise, we'll plan on just having that discussion with the committee.
Works for me. Okay, moving on to
Madam
item
Chair?
7. Oh,
Madam
Olin?
Chair, before we leave that, if the chair and the executive director are going to have that discussion about whether or not we go to Zoom meetings, could we have a little discussion then about people's preferences for Zoom or not to Zoom?
So what we've just done is put the discussion onto the calendar for March so that the whole committee can discuss it. What the director is saying that is if we're preempted by state law that we have to meet in person and that would take effect in March, that staff will move forward with an in-person. Otherwise, we're meeting on Zoom and we're having a discussion about how to meet for the rest
Very
of the
good.
year.
Okay, thank you. That takes care of my concern.
Thank you. Moving on to number 7. Ooh, exciting. Appointing a chair and vice chair for 2023. Consistent with the decision to align the leadership with the calendar year. So as you know, we moved the selection of chair so that our dates would coincide with the dates of the board. And it's that time now. So
I
here we
would
are.
move Lisa Baker as chair.
This is all you guys. If you have a second or not a second.
I will also I'll just note the two that we do suggest appointing a vice chair as well.
Right.
Though of course that's at the committee's discretion.
All right.
I have a question. Go ahead, Nolan. You're me.
I'd move then Lisa Baker as chair and Steve Streeter as vice chair.
So I have a motion. Do I have a second? Nobody needs to raise their hand for this.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion for Lisa Baker to continue as chair and a motion for Steve Streeter to continue as vice chair. We have a second. Shall we have a vote? All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Seeing none, you guys are stuck with us for another year.
Just a follow up, Lisa, have you really been chair for several years? I don't know.
I don't know if I've been for
Seems like
several years.
It
No,
seems like it's been maybe 2
I
years.
came in part of 1 year, and then I was chair for the full year last year, and now I've been elected again. So not several years. Just been on the board for quite a while.
Just clarifying.
No, it's just so tedious to have me as chair. It seems like forever.
Well, and since you've been such a good attendee, I've not had to serve as vice chair, so.
Oh, I'm going to fix that, Stephen. Okay.
I apologize for the ambiguity in the staff report. I couldn't remember it and couldn't find any record of when you were appointed chair, Madam Chair.
It's all good. I do want to say congratulations to Stephen. He's been a good vice chair. Number 8, we're going to get an update on our favorite route, 42A and 42B, and talk about service changes, options for other improvements, and address concerns that have been expressed by riders, especially in South Davis. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Chair Baker. This is Eric Wright's staff, as discussed. So as this committee knows, on September 19th, 2022, the district implemented the first round of service changes on the Route 42. These changes included taking the service to 45-minute headways throughout the day and 30-minute headways during the commute in the morning. It also changed the route, making it more streamlined in the city of Davis and downtown Sacramento. The big part of these service changes were to make the route operate in a more streamlined, more efficient way, and to provide a better, more efficient service throughout the route. Also of note is that on January 15th of 2023, we also added 9 additional trips to the Route 42. Most of the discussion that we're going to have tonight is going to be about the most recent or about the service changes from September. So just some ridership impacts. We've seen a 29% increase in overall ridership in the 3 months compared to a year before. The thing I would also comment about is that the ridership has dropped a little bit in the past months, but we've seen the fact that December's ridership seemed to be very connected to the additional days that the University of California, Davis students were on break. So we're pretty confident that there's a correlation between those two. Thank you, Heather, for putting up this map. The map is to show the service that was removed from the city of Davis. In particular, the red line shows where we're no longer providing service on F Street, Covell, and in South Davis. And we have a variety of feedback that we've received from Yolo bus riders in a vast amount of different ways. We've received phone calls, we've received emails, we've received messages through LinkedIn and a variety of other social media to, kind of compile what the communities think of the new service. A good amount of the feedback we received was very positive. A large amount of the community enjoys the increased frequency and the speed of the route. And there is an understanding from people who understand that. There are concerns about the route too, in particular, the removal of bus stops and the route from Covell and from South Davis, as was discussed. Moving forward, the plan had always been to implement this new service and then review it, see what the public thought, see how the service operated, and think about how services could continue to be improved. And there's a number of different potential service improvements. There's an idea of increased frequency a little bit beyond the peak. There's discussions about how we can put service into South Davis and facilitate mobility in that area. I do want to comment with the South Davis service. The district staff has been really reviewing how much of South Davis now actually has a closer service than they did before, with access over the bike bridges from South Davis to 5th Street. And I think the South Davis closest to El Macero is the one portion that has the least amount of service. So we're here today just to kind of have a discussion and talk with the CAC about thoughts and comments and possible proposals for improving service. And Chair, I think I saw a hand get raised.
Yep, I'm just waiting for you to finish. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about any in-depth on options, but if you're ready to take comment, I think we'll take comment from CAC, then we'll check for public comment, and then we'll come back to staff. And
Sounds
so
great.
in order in which I see them, it's Molly first, Steve, you're up second, Olin, you're number 3, Andy, you're number 4. Molly, take it away.
Sure. So my question is about the service, the ridership improvements. And I just wanted to know, when did the fares, what date did fare service return? So when did it stop being free?
November 1st.
November 1st. Oh, okay. So December wasn't also free.
No, December wasn't also free.
Right. Okay. That's what I thought. I couldn't remember.
Yeah, the interesting thing is we still had high increase in ridership in November. It did drop off a little bit from when we were offering free rides, but overall stayed fairly well high on a weekday average and weekend average. Where we really saw the drop off. So this year, the UC Davis campus was closed starting December 9th. Last year, it didn't close, I think, until the 17th, if I remember correctly. And that's just the way the schedule panned out on the calendar. So I think that's a major component of the ridership that happened in December.
Sure. So, and it would be interesting to know more about sort of fare paying customers and students who may not be, to understand more about who may have stopped riding after fares increased. I don't know. I'm just curious about that. If that's something that you have any information on, we can discuss in a future meeting.
Molly, does that complete your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Steve?
Okay, I have 3 things. One, there's a comment under ridership impact of 80,000, but it looks like from the data that's right nearby that it maybe is intended to say 86,000 rides in 3 months for October, December.
Yes, Steve.
22.
That is correct. That does look like a typo.
Okay. The other comment, there was one of the 4240 A and B people commenting on Cal Boulevard. People with disabilities can get reserve Yellow Bus special, or I don't understand why that's even there, but maybe they were unaware that that was an option. And then my other question is, how does the Yellow Bus schedule coordinate with Unitrans, particularly the A, P, and Q buses that could help people get from Covell Boulevard and South Davis to the 42A and B stops closest to them?
Good point.
The interlining is interesting, I think, on some of the routes because it's determinant on which direction the passenger is going. But staff can go ahead and take a look at both of them. I know, for example, with the A line, which does the loop through South Davis, that the connection is kind of tight to, it's either tight or long, depending on how well you think you can walk from the bus stop to the other bus stop. But that is only for catching the route 42B towards Sacramento. That was the one I was looking at the time.
This is
But
Andy.
staff can go ahead.
I was just going to respond to Steve's comment on Unitrans. I'm going to I'll hold my other comments till later, of course, but just to respond to that, I do have some experience taking the Unitrans P and Q line because I live up along Covell to catch the 42. And I'd say with that, it's in terms of just because they don't operate on the same frequencies, like one's every 30. I mean, well, before the recent change, it was like every 30 minutes to an hour, or every like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, sometimes an hour on the 42. Then Unitrans is like every 30 minutes to an hour mostly. So it's kind of hit or miss. Like sometimes you can definitely hit it really well at that Mason second stop, but there are other times where it definitely does not align. So I'd say personally, like my preferred option, if I can, is to bike to the 42 as opposed to using Unitrans. So that's just my personal experience with it.
Thank you, Andy.
Andy.
You explained that very well compared to how I did. I appreciate that.
Steve, do you have, was that all three, or do you still
No,
have?
That covers my comments. Thank you.
That covers your comments. Thank you very much. That makes it Olin's turn.
Sure. Eric, in commenting about the ridership in 2021 to 2022, I'm not sure that the increase in ridership will carry through next year. In 2021, we were still in the midst of COVID, much more so than we are now. So it'll be interesting next year. So I'll just leave that with you. And I want you to know, Autumn, that I appreciate your bringing this back on the agenda. I've expressed a lot of concerns about the loss of service to South Davis, and you've suggested that getting over the Dave Pell's bike bridge and catching it there is a good alternative, and I think probably it is, although I haven't tested it. I think I said that I would, and I haven't done that yet, but I'll at some point when things quiet down a little bit, I will do that. I just really think the loss of direct service to South Davis is unfortunate, but I also recognize the need for streamlining. It is important. I had a flight into Sacramento Metro several years ago, and I think I spent about an hour and a half getting from the airport to the destination in South Davis, and then from there walked home. But I'm not counting the walk in that. I think it was an hour and a half by the time we sat at County Fair, and then went on to my final destination, which was the last stop in South Davis. It was an hour and a half, and that's just a non-starter for most people. And so at any rate, I think we need to keep looking at it, and maybe there can be developed some kind of coordination with Unitrans to make it so that Andy can get to Second and Mace when it's raining hard and storming, and not get wet, or not get more wet than he would on his bike. Thank you.
Thank you, Olin. Andy.
Thank you. These are all great comments. Thanks everyone. So just a couple of things here. So adding on the South Davis issue, I think a key issue both been seeing here and just in the comments as well is that Mace overcrossing that makes it something even relative to some other parts of South Davis, might be near to the Dave Pell's overpass or the pole line overpass, where there's good biking and walking infrastructure, and might actually have better transit access, better access to the 42 than they did before the change. It's that southeastern part of Davis where the route used to go that has been hurt, that has been arguably hurt because they have to deal with the Mace overpass, which is quite unsafe to get across. And it's definitely unfortunate. And I think the unfortunate thing is that I know that Davis is looking at doing a big project on Mace, and the the Davis members on the YCTD board, when they were both on city council, definitely have voted to move that project forward. That mainly is focused on adding traffic lanes. So I wonder if there's opportunity like to work with them to incorporate, to broaden that project more, so that project might like extending the scope of that to the overpass, and looking at like putting in, maybe extending the protected bike lanes that are on Mace over that overpass, or just adding some form of better bike and pedestrian infrastructure. So that's a better experience for folks getting to the Mason second stop, and of course improving the infrastructure at the stop as well. So has there been effort on YCTD's end to potentially coordinate on that?
Andy, are you referring to the Mace and Cowell project? Or
Yeah, the one like the Cowell, right now it's
The
like
Mace
Cowell
Mass.
South
Yeah.
that it's focused on.
My understanding is that project is kind of that they're at a point where they've sort of finalized their approach that they're doing for that. You know, my understanding when the DISC project was a live option, you know, when we were talking with the city and the project and the DISC developer about improvements to Mace, the overcrossing, as well as the portion of Mace north of the overcrossing. So you know, that the developer, as my understanding, was planning to pay for a process to design some improvements. And you know, with that not moving forward, I don't know whether the city has a plan B for that. You probably know better than I do, but that's kind of the last conversations that we were a part of, was before the referendum on the DISC project.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll definitely look into that, and definitely keep that conversation, try to do my best to keep that conversation going at the city level. And also just one other thing I wanted to bring up, again, I don't think has been brought up yet, is, and this goes back to the general rerouting of the bus in downtown Sacramento in September. As I recall, that part of the idea behind that was to make the service more reliable, because there are a lot of public events on Capitol Mall. So the idea of moving it to L Street was to make it so that you knew where the bus was going to be. But in my experience, I've gone to a couple of Kings games this year, and the team's playing well, so it's been a lot of fun. And now that the bus runs later, that's even more convenient for people to take it to Kings games or other downtown kind of events. But unfortunately, like, because the buses aren't able to get through on L Street after the games, when that would be like potentially like a prime opportunity to really make it easy to take transit to games, if the bus could stop right in front of the arena, especially if people can't drive on the street and you just have transit there. So I'm curious if there's opportunity, if there been any conversations with the city of Sacramento to potentially make it so the bus can reliably stay on L Street even during games.
It's been hit and miss, Andy. We've ran into we've asked for that, and in the past we have been granted it, but we found that different police officers will let you through the police barricade and different officers will not, and we're trying to still figure out a way to make sure that always happens, and that's why we're continuing to reroute when those go on, because we have not been able to get confirmation from the police department. Yes, we'll allow this to happen all the time.
Okay, so that's mainly like I think that's mainly like a SAC PD issue.
Yes. And honestly, we're working on getting a new contact, because we have been having a number of fun issues where the reroutes that were talked about by SAC PD and the city of SAC have not matched up with what happens when we get there. And we know that happens every now and then, but it seems to be happening quite frequently right now. And that seems to have a lot to do with how the people on the ground perceive what should happen compared to what was planned.
Okay, I see.
So I'm trying to be nice about that as much as I can. It's been kind of frustrating for both staff and for our customers, because we've been doing a number of reroutes. Another fun part's been 9th and K in particular. People blocking that, and the police officers just going ahead and waving us to go past the intersection because it's blocked. So yes,
Yeah,
we're trying to fix that as we speak.
Yeah, I've had some experiences having to like run to a different stop where I've been at that 9th and K stop, and like someone's parked in the lane and the bus can't get through. So then I find myself like running over to Fifth Street or even like Front Street. So
Yes, and we've been having a large amount of discussions, both internally, and we'll start having them. They probably need to happen at a higher level. So we'll probably be escalating that above the people we've been working with.
thanks for the efforts on that.
You're welcome.
Those are your comments, Andy?
Yep. Yeah, those are the main
So,
things I had.
routing it back to some of the discussion that staff is asking for options, and as I'm hearing it, you're looking at members talking about better bike pedestrian linkages, using potentially existing projects to help get that done, better coordination with Unitrans. But I'd also like to kind of come back to the micro mobility component, which I have not heard, and it certainly seems that with nothing happening in the Covell area, that might be a option for that entire section that's been eliminated. So
Yeah. I can speak to that a little bit, Madam Chair, if you'd like. I've been involved in conversations recently. So the City of Davis and UC Davis had an RFP out to solicit a new bike share and scooter share provider. That RFP just closed on Friday, I believe, and they did have a number of bidders. And so I talked with Lucas Griffiths at Campus Planning, who is the lead on that project, about us being involved in the planning and rollout of that service, so that as much as possible it can help connect people and address some of those first mile and last mile gaps, particularly in South Davis and the areas where we know that there's now gaps. As well, we talked about the fact that we have so many people who are coming in on the 42 or the Causeway connection that want to bring their bikes, and the bike racks on our buses are often full in the mornings coming in, and then they're full in the evenings going out. And so that for people to be able to have their bike on the other end, whether it's in Woodland or Sacramento, and then know that they have a bike share option when they get to the Davis side, could be really helpful for those folks who find themselves unable to get their bike on the bus because there's no room on the bike racks.
well, thank you. And hearing that, do we have additional comments from CAC members on those kinds of connection possibilities? Not seeing any. I'll go back to Eric. Have you gotten what you need from the CAC in terms of comments?
I just wanted to check the temperature on one more, which was the restoration of the discontinued 44 service. I know that we have had people comment about the complete removal of service from South Davis, and for some people that has meant the 42, but for others that has included the Route 44, which for people's knowledge was a express route that connected South Davis to downtown Sacramento.
I see a hand up with Olin. So Olin, you've got the floor.
Sure, thanks.
Followed by
Madam Chair.
Molly. Molly, you're up next.
Eric, the 44 was, when I wasn't riding my bike to Sacramento, the 44 was my main bus when I could get off work in time to catch it. But if I couldn't get off work, there were about 3 other options at that time. Now, this goes back 10 years or so. But what are the other options for express service for folks in South Davis besides the 44 at this point?
There is none.
None at all.
Yes.
Wow. That's, prior to tonight, when we discussed the 42 service, the comment was, well, there's still going to be express service with the 44. But is that because I can't believe there's no ridership. That bus was always practically full, going and coming.
So Olin, I can jump in here. The 44 was discontinued along with all of the I should say suspended along with all the express services at the beginning of COVID, but before Eric and I were on board. And then as part of YOLO Go, the decision was made to bring back some, but not all of the express services. And it was the 3 top performing express service routes that were brought back. It's the 43, the 45, I want to say, in Woodland, the Woodland to downtown Sacramento Express. And then I always get the number wrong,
230.
the 230 in West Davis. So yeah, so the remainder of the express services, including the South Davis Express, were permanently discontinued at that time. And so I think what we're suggesting here is maybe that the elimination of the South Davis Express and the rerouting of the 42 kind of taken together, that amplifies, that magnifies the impact for people in South Davis. And one option could be bringing back the 44.
I'd sure agree with that. It makes sense. I'd recommend that strongly. Unless things have changed dramatically in the last, 10 years or whatever it's been. I think it'd be very popular. I'd at least give it a try, maybe give it a test, and give it time so that people are aware that they've got it again. And then if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But I suspect strongly that it would.
Molly, followed by Andy.
Yeah, I can't speak on behalf of I'm not a resident of South Davis, but I would think that in order to, I think a more comprehensive kind of review of express bus service elsewhere in other regions, and whether that service has bounced back, and a feeder service to Sacramento might be necessary, rather than making sort of I guess how I phrase this, but I guess restarting the exact same 44 may not be as strategic as sort of evaluating the unmet needs of the region and thinking about how to connect those folks to that, to it, right? And similarly for the 45, which, my husband did take sometimes, I think, going into Sacramento, but mostly took the 42 because it was just so scary to be out on your own and at the bus stop. And then if you missed it, you had no other options, because it wasn't also a 42 stop. It was a different stop, right? So I think, I don't know, I just think that as riders, I feel like the express buses never worked well for me, because I didn't find that the stops were, that the times were great, and that it felt scary to be, in the one case in the South Davis stop that was over by West Village where I worked, it felt like it was an unsafe place to walk toward too. So I think it should be reevaluated, if there really is a discussion on this, and not just sort of let's continue the exact same 44, which has been gone now for so many years, that I think it would take some time to regenerate the ridership demand.
Molly, I would tell you that staff would absolutely do a full planning review of this before we would implement it. It's the same process that we're going through in Woodland with the Woodland local service. There's a variety of discussions, and so much has changed with COVID. So to assume that everything that went back to normal, I think would be inappropriate. So we would, so we would do the planning. I just wanted to bring the information to this group and see what their opinion of that service and the thought of it is. But well taken with the information, and we would push hard to do a comprehensive review of exactly the needs of that community, and try to connect with them a lot like we're doing with the current Woodland service changes.
Thank you. We still have comments from members. Andy?
Thank you. So one thing I'd like to point out regarding the 44. So I think it was last month at the BTSSC meeting here in Davis, we were speaking about there's a project to improve the bike lanes and whatnot on Cowell. And in the discussion of that project, it seemed like some of the staff were under the impression the 44 still ran on Cowell. It was being mentioned as like one of the buses that ran there. So they didn't seem to realize that hadn't been operating for some time. So it could be something where we maybe just making sure that folks from the city are aware that that's not operating right now could spur more discussion and potential discussion for funding and whatnot to improve the transit situation in South Davis. And then also speaking to Molly's more general comments on the just the state of express service, we come out of the pandemic. We still have a lot of folks working remotely and whatnot. How are so I know like the express services that are operating, like the 43, which I've taken sometimes, and then the other couple of routes that did come back. How have those been doing?
They haven't had the same rebound on ridership that we've seen across other routes. And the real, I think the biggest issue is the variance that you're talking about, because people aren't going to work 5 days a week. So we have kind of this combination of not everybody going back to work in downtown Sacramento, matched with people who are going back aren't going back, 5 days a week. And so we may see a good amount of passengers on a Wednesday, but on Tuesday and Friday, maybe less passengers on a per hour basis. So there's a lot of analysis and a lot of connecting with people to find out if it's the service we're providing that's not meeting their needs, or if there just isn't the need because, so few people are going that direction these days. I don't think it's so few people going, just from the traffic counts I've seen on 80. But it may just be the weird schedules that people are working now don't match up with what used to be Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. So there's a lot of planning that needs to be done to put a good service out there.
Thank you. Olin, did you have another comment?
Yeah, just a comment to Eric and then to Molly. Eric, it'll be interesting to see what happens after the end of February, when the governor's proclamation is pulled back, to see if we get more folks working downtown in person. So that's something to keep your eye on, I would suggest. And then Molly, I appreciate your comments. And the big thing that has happened is Zoom. And if it continues in some form, or remote work continues to some extent, maybe not the full extent that it has been, but if people don't return to work in person, then there may not need be a express services in any extensive way. And then just one last, I have a question for you, where you mentioned West Village. Where is West Village?
It's in West Davis.
Right. Okay. And which part of West Davis?
Off a lake.
Yeah.
Okay. Now the 44 went all the way over there?
No, the 230 did.
Okay.
And there is only 3 trips on that bus service. So I know exactly what Molly's talking about. I had that same anxiety. I used to ride from Arthur, which is the last stop before it gets on the freeway.
And it's a little shaky over there in terms of security?
It's not the security issue. It's that the only bus that does that, provides that service, is 3 trips in the morning and 3 trips coming back in the afternoon. And there's not much of an option if you miss the last trip.
I got it. Okay. All right. Thank you.
I just want to jump in that I thought Molly's point was a really good one, that, particularly on the Sacramento side, to have the express stops be different than the 42 stops is a little bit, would be a little bit scary. And that's a really good point. That's probably something that we should be looking at, so that if you miss, especially because we have such a reduced express service right now, due to our driver shortage, we don't have very many trips on any of those routes these days. So if you miss one, you've really missed it. So. Okay.
And Eric, when you talk about the West Village, you're talking about Sutter Hospital and that complex?
Molly can probably speak better to me, than I can. But West Village, there's a shopping center at the corner of Lake and
I got you.
Arlington.
Yeah, on the south side, Olin, not the north side.
Right. No, I've got it now. You're talking about Molly, I think, was talking about the lake
Westlake Village, I believe.
Westlake Village.
West
Okay.
Village is a neighborhood on the UC Davis campus.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that would not have been served by the 44, right?
No, it's by the 230.
230. Okay, right. Thank you.
Okay. Staff, did you get what you were looking for from us?
That was it. A great discussion. I appreciate it, Chair Baker and CAC members.
Thank you very much. I think that takes us on to item number 9 now, which is for our information, and going to pass it back to staff.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and Brian Abenat and I are going to tag team on this. This is meant to provide an update and to answer any questions that you may have about what's happening with the YoloTD managed lanes project. There's been a lot of movement in the last couple months since the last meeting, and we wanted to make sure we took the opportunity to bring you up to speed and answer any questions that you have. So I'll start us off, and then I'll hand it off to Brian. So this is just kind of an outline. We've got a lot of slides, but we're going to try to move through fairly quickly. I know it's getting to the late side, and there's little ones on laps that probably need to go to bed soon. So next slide. So just a reminder, we are talking about oh gosh, sorry, cat just failed to jump on my lap. 17-mile tolled managed lane on 80 between Kidwell Road on the Solano County side and West El Camino in Sacramento on 80 and the I-5 interchange on US 50. That is the overall project scope. We are currently focused on a phase 1, which is a smaller scope between Richards Boulevard in Davis and the 8050 interchange in West Sacramento as a first phase for this project. The goal is easing congestion, improving transit and active transportation access along the corridor. Next slide. The history, a brief history, just to remind everyone, in the summer of 2021, YCTD was awarded an $86 million infra award for a somewhat broad scope for the project. To narrow that scope, we established an ad hoc committee in November of 2021 to kind of coordinate and negotiate and advocate with Caltrans about what exactly the project was we were going to build. The board adopted project goals in December 2021, held a managed lanes workshop where we heard from kind of UC Davis experts and other projects from around California to talk about the various options. And then over the course of the next 10 months, kind of engaged in close negotiations with Caltrans until October 2022, where we reached an agreement with them to have an express lane or high occupancy toll lane be the preferred alternative for the project. We also worked to procure a tolling expert that we could use to help us inform our planning for tolling on this corridor. And then in November 2022 to really this January, we once we had our tolling expert on board, we did some internal work planning to kind of figure out, okay, now that we have an agreement with Caltrans about moving forward with an express lane, what do we actually need to do to make that happen? And next slide. So just a quick snapshot, the total project cost is about $208 million plus potential mitigation costs. Of that, we have about $94 million committed. We now have two requests, one that's gone in for SB1, the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, TSEP, for $103 million. And then we have a $13 million ask that's going into the SACOG Transformative Program next week. And the timeline is, the goal is to have an environmental review cleared by the end of this year. We're expecting a draft EIR in April, and Caltrans being the lead on that. And then right away and design completed in 2025 with construction ending in summer of 2025 and the project done in fall of 2027. Next slide. So what we're going to be talking about now in the phase we're in is what we're calling tolling advanced planning, which is really a kind of a set of deliverables that are foundational for doing tolling. These are both required for us to apply for tolling authority from the California Transportation Commission and to effectively design and manage tolling on this corridor. It's about a 12 to 18 month process with about a $2 million price tag. As the first express lane or toll facility in the Sacramento region, YCTD gets the privilege of having to kind of go through the process of creating that for the entire region because we're going first. So a lot of this work is not just for our corridor. It's really about how do we advance the goal of having roadway pricing in the SACOG region. But because we're going first, we get the responsibility of trying to make that happen. And so that's part of the reason we are asking for $2 million from SACOG in order to advance this, because we know it is actually a priority for the entire SACOG region. We're just the ones who are in the best position to move that forward. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian to go through some of the details around what it exactly this looks like over the next 12 to 18 months.
Great, thanks, Autumn. Appreciate it. Next slide, Heather, if you're ready to do so. So, when you add tolling to a freeway, it really increases the complexity of the project. And Heather, if you want to move to the next slide, what we're going to do is kind of walk through what adding price managed lanes does to a project. So you have two flow charts here. The first one kind of shows you what a typical capital project would look like, including one with just high occupancy vehicle lanes. You'd have sort of pre-project planning. You would start to select a project from your planning document. You go through a pretty standard P&ED phase. You would design it and you would construct it. But price managed lanes does makes things much more complicated. First, you have to continuously do stakeholder engagement. You have to assess, sort of the operational feasibility. There's concepts of operations, which are documents which sort of lay out in understandable terms what you're planning to do and how you're planning on doing it. You also have to look at what the traffic volumes and the revenue generation will look like, so that you can determine whether or not your system will cover its own costs. If you successfully navigated that process, you have to procure your tolling system and your tolling operators. And then you also have to get approval from the California Transportation Commission for the authority to implement your tolling project. And so we're sort of in this first half or the left half of the process right now, and needing to cover a lot of ground over the next 12 to 18 months. The second half of the flow chart to the right is really about sort of installing and operating the tolling, the managed lanes once the project is constructed. And there's still a lot that needs to occur there. But that's not where we are right now. As we approach that part of the process, we can describe those in a little more detail, but we won't go into deep explanation on that today. So next slide, Heather, please. One thing that we do want to go through is sort of the policy issues that are really important for your price managed lanes project, because it really determines what your revenue generation can be and how you're trying, what you're trying to achieve with it. So what you're looking at, the key, decision variables are, what hours and what weekday, what days of the week are you going to impose, pricing on the new managed lanes. What are your occupancy counts going to? If you're going to have an occupancy, threshold beyond which you would allow HO, high occupancy vehicles to travel through the lane free. What is that number? Or are you going to even do that at all? There's also, equity and other, financial factors that need to be considered in the planning phase, such as should certain users and demographics be allowed discounts or exemptions so that they can have access to the facilities. Also, do we continue to allow clean air vehicles access to to the managed lanes, without having to pay, or commercial trucks. Should the smaller commercial trucks be allowed to access the managed lanes as well? And then the next item related to access, you have to think about, design a little bit, and will it be a buffered managed lane, or will it have, a physical barrier between the general purpose lanes and the managed lanes? And if so, what are your access points? And then so starting to think about, okay, zones of access to which people can actually, enter into the express lane, and when they can get out of it as well. And then, what are those costs going to be as you enter into the toll zones? Then, of course, what are the payments? Your policies are going to determine, what your range of fee will be to travel through the managed lanes. So, some projects impose, set a cap, and they say, they made a policy decision they won't charge more than a certain amount. So those are all topics of consideration that we still need to navigate in order to determine the overall feasibility and what the what types of outcomes we can expect from this project. So next slide. And of course, we don't have the answers to these questions yet, and they're complicated. They require a lot of analysis. They require a lot of coordination. They require a lot of community input, and they require a lot of person time in order to reach the end of this tolling advanced planning process. And so that's why you see what seems like a pretty high figure for non-construction related work. Excuse me. And as Autumn mentioned, the CAUD regional funding round is open right now. We're partnering with Caltrans, who's submitting $11 million capital grant application. So we're co-applying with them during this funding cycle so that we can include the tolling advanced planning work into the project. The one distinction here is that Caltrans wouldn't be leading this tolling advanced planning effort. We would still be an independent implementing agency for the TAP work. Excuse me, apologize for my voice. Next slide, Heather, please. We'll turn it back over to Autumn to talk about sort of our internal processes with the ad hoc committees and the board.
Thanks, Brian. So we had previously had what was called our YoloTD Managed Lanes Committee that was working as kind of guiding the work to get the project, this kind of project description and negotiating what is the project with Caltrans. We've now retired that committee. Several of the board members who served on that are no longer on the YCD board. And we have created a new tolling advanced planning committee. It is very much going to be focused on the establishment of a governing body for tolling, as well as then some of these kind of concept of operations, traffic and revenue review, tolling authority applications, some of those different pieces that Brian mentioned. So at the January board meeting, the board did appoint this committee. It's comprised of a representative from the city of West Sacramento, which is Dr. Dante Early, a representative from the Yolo County / City of Davis, which is Lucas Frericks, the county supervisor who's taken over Don Saylor's seat, and then an ad hoc committee, ex officio UC Davis member, which is Matt Dulcich from UC Davis, who also served on the prior committee. So those will be the three YCD board members that will be kind of steering this work going forward. In addition, we've begun submitting written monthly reports to the board as part of the board packet on this project, so that there's, even when it's not agendized for board discussion, there's an update that the board and committee members and members of the public can see to kind of keep the people apprised of what's happening as we go through this process. Next slide. So lastly, yeah, the action that the board took in January was they approved a resolution for staff to submit this $2 million Safe Hub grant application, which is going in next week. Our part of it is 2 million. Caltrans is also, as Brian mentioned, applying for 11 million. And they retired the older committee and established this new committee. And I think that's all the slides we have. And if I have not put all the babies to sleep with that, then we'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
That's what I get for muting myself. Okay. Thank you for the presentation. I think I saw Olin, Andy, and then Steve Streeter. So can we take it in that order?
Very quick question. Autumn, when we last spoke about the draft EIR, you said it would be March, April, and now it looks like it's April. And what's the most obvious way to the public that it will be noticed?
Yeah, great question. We're anticipating seeing an administrative draft hopefully soon. And then we have committed to working with Caltrans to ensure a bit more visibility and outreach. So YCTD will be, even though we're not the lead on the CEQA process, we're going to be advertising the availability of the EIR. We're going to be partnering with our local jurisdictions to host workshops. So we're kind of still working through the exact details of that outreach strategy with Caltrans, but we definitely want to make sure that we have robust participation, from communities here in Yolo County, even as Caltrans does their kind of official noticing of the EIR.
Great. Can I ask that I be put on that list as the chair of the Willow Bank CSA?
Great.
To receive that notice? We've got some committee members who are very interested in sound walls, as you know, and they want to be able to make their concerns and interests in that known to Caltrans. Thank you.
Thanks for the reminder on that.
Andy.
Thank you. So yeah, I think my question was also just about that environmental review. So thanks for asking that, Olin. And thanks for staff for providing that info. Definitely, I'm keeping an eye out for. I'm excited to see that environmental report as well. I guess one other quick question that I have, I'm just looking at this cool picture of the flooded bypass there. Is when you have the railroad tracks in the middle of there. So I'm curious, is Capital Corridor involved with this project at all?
That's a great question. I mean, to my knowledge, they have not been actively engaged, certainly not with any of the conversations we are having. But I'm sure that they'll be receiving a copy of the EIR and being asked to comment as any other agency would be. But it's been pretty limited to my knowledge.
Thank you.
Steve.
Unmute. My question is pretty basic. When I was starting to read the report, I ran across an acronym I wasn't familiar with. I thought, oh, infra, that must be like infrastructure, but could somebody explain what infra actually means?
Yeah, oh boy, I'm not sure I'll get the acronym right. Brian's unmuting, maybe he remembers, but it's a federal program for infrastructure. But Brian, you got the acronym?
No, I'm gonna look it up because I can't.
It's just for us novices. If we run across that, we don't know what it means. The first,
yeah, it stands for investing. Word. Give me a second.
Yeah, it's these acronyms that only folks in Washington, D.C. can come up with. But it's essentially a competitive discretionary grant program for transportation infrastructure projects.
Okay, thank you.
Infrastructure for Rebuilding America is what I found on the web.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments from CAC members? I have one. I'm gonna go
I
last.
have one more comment. I'm sorry.
Okay, Molly, followed by Patrick.
Okay. So my question is, I guess, so you had said that, Brian, that there would be, some careful analyses done. I imagine in this stage in the process. So I'm just curious, I guess, like you could do 400 different scenarios, right? Like there are so many scenarios to build. Like, how are you informing that process of building those scenarios that you then evaluate, and then what are we trying to max min for, right? Like min max, or, I feel like I think we need to, I guess, maybe this conversation has already been had, but I feel like that I'm not clear on that necessarily.
No, it's a good question. And, Caltrans has goals they're trying to achieve, and we have goals that we're trying to achieve. Back in December of not this past year, but the year before, our board established, goals, which was included in the staff report of what our priorities are. So we're looking at the different scenarios and alternatives through that lens. And so we've been having conversations with Caltrans, over the past 8 months about, hey, some of these scenarios are really important to us. We really think that you need to be looking at, scenario A, B, and C as well. And then we have to get into kind of the policy, realm in terms of, what exactly, what assumptions are we going to make regarding operational policies that feed into the analysis of those alternatives. And so, there isn't a min-max that we're trying to achieve right now. We do know that there are some, mitigations that need to occur related to greenhouse gas emissions, and those are informing our analysis as well. So there's lots of factors involved. Maybe Autumn wants to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think you said it well, Brian. I mean, I would say that two things. I mean, in terms of scenarios, one scenario that we have continued to push for, and it continues to be very much a live scenario, is that we're not just building an additional lane, that we're actually converting an existing lane to a price lane. So that's something that we continue to push, and that's a priority for us. It's not been a priority for Caltrans, but it is still out there, and it's part of the commitments that we have from Caltrans is to evaluate that. And I think the reason that that's important to the board is because both from a traffic operations perspective and from a VMT perspective, when you have multiple price lanes and you're converting a general purpose lane to a price lane, it's actually going to operate better for traffic because, again, you've got now 2 lanes where you have the ability to price it to regulate demand. You're creating more revenue, which means you have more revenue to invest in transit and transportation equity projects. And it really helps address the VMT impacts because you're not just adding capacity, you're actually managing capacity more effectively. And again, able to attain a higher level of kind of transit use of the corridor. So for all those reasons, I think that's a scenario that's really important to us. I think where we have differed most from Caltrans with regard to our goals is kind of optimizing around, transit and kind of multimodal use of the corridor, equity, and kind of doing as much as we've been kind of pushing as much as possible to mitigate as much VMT as possible. And I think that's a bit of where we see the tension that we continue to navigate with Caltrans.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful.
Patrick, then Olin, then Andy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Brian, for the presentation. I wanted to just take a moment to appreciate that you all being the trailblazers on this kind of process, because I think so much of the air quality that our region faces and the issues and stuff, I think really literally start right here, and then we all share that air quality. So I think finding new solutions is something that's pretty long overdue, and I think that the work that you go into it to create a kind of blueprint here is going to be really important. And thank you for also the pushback.
Oh, you're muted.
Not sure if there was actually pushback, but not just doing another lane, but finding creative solutions, even though it's taking pretty hard work to do that. That hasn't necessarily been done before. I think that one of the questions I had, and I'm sorry if I missed it, was some of these considerations that you're talking about, of who will use it and how will they use it and things like that. Did you say you had a timeline for making some of those decisions?
We hit mute, unmute at the same time. Yeah, that process all needs to occur in the next 12 months, and that's what the funding that we're we'll be able to advance some of this work without the funding, just because it needs to occur. But it all does need to occur like within the next 12 to 18 months, because Caltrans needs to be able to lock in some design assumptions, and then there's also a time pressure to begin obligating some of that infra grant funding by I want to say fall of 24. So it's a tight window, and we're going to be very busy trying to navigate through this process, and trying to set that precedent for the region.
So Olin and then Andy.
Sure. Well, Autumn and Brian, and maybe I have had this conversation with this group, or maybe it's been with Caltrans when they appeared before the Willowbank CSA about exactly a year ago this month, which is a good deal of this traffic, the increased traffic, is Bay Area stuff. And I understand that this project is on SACOG and MTC's list as kind of a super regional project. And I'm wondering how much MTC is contributing to the effort, both in terms of the analysis and whatnot, as well as funding.
So MTC is not contributing funding, but they are definitely a supporter and an advocate for the project. I think, one of the things we'll be looking at is kind of piggybacking on kind of what they've done, both in, because Solano County, right, is as part of the Bay Area, is currently building express lanes that are going to go all the way to Vacaville to 505. And so we'll be looking at, there will be a gap between Vacaville and the county line. And so I think looking at how do we close that gap is going to be an important kind of question, as well. How do we want our policies to sort of be consistent with what the Bay Area is doing versus needing to be different based on the differences that we see here in the region. So for example, like the Bay Area doesn't do any tolling on the weekends, but we know that for our segment of 80, some of the worst traffic is on the weekends, right? And so I think trying to figure out how do we both, again, kind of piggyback and create an opportunity for there to be a consistent experience for people who are coming from the Bay Area and passing through our region, but at the same time recognizing that the challenges are different here. I think, and so MTC has been a great partner in that. They've also been helping us in terms of sharing information about what they're doing as kind of an experienced toll operator to help us, understand what we need to do. But I would say, so we have their moral support. We don't have any financial support.
Mm-hmm. That's unfortunate, because they really, I think, should be prepared, because it benefits their residents as much or perhaps more than ours. So I'm a little surprised, but I know how it goes. Now there's precedent for in this region for one county to give its funds to build a project in Sacramento County, and that's El Dorado County. Their residents, many of whom worked in the Sacramento area, were stuck in congestion as soon as they hit the Sacramento County line, because there were no carpool lanes there. So El Dorado County agreed to pay for carpool lanes down to a certain point, and I'm not remembering where exactly, but it was significantly extended into Sacramento County. And this goes back maybe 15 years. But so when there's a reason to do that, I think agencies should consider it. And I don't know where you make that argument, but with them, or how you do it, but it's fair, I believe. And then the other thing, and you and Autumn, you and Brian are probably aware of this, but Caltrans, I can understand why, and I didn't realize until tonight that Yolo County was pushing a scenario whereby no lanes were added. And if that's the case, I can understand Caltrans' concerns about that. They got just devastated when they opened the first HOV lane in California down in the Santa Monica Freeway in the late 70s. They did not add a lane, they took a lane away and turned it into an HOV lane. And that just, it was, you know, you can almost still hear the screams from people in the Caltrans District 7 office over that one. So at any rate, that's the background.
I just want to clarify, Olin, that we are not proposing not building a lane and only converting a lane. We're proposing adding a new lane and converting a general purpose lane.
Okay, so you'd have two
managed lanes, correct.
essentially.
Correct. Yeah.
And you could, and I think you were saying you could handle them differently. One might be a pay toll lane, and the other one might be for carpools, that sort of thing. Potentially.
I think, yeah, I think what we're proposing is actually that what we've talked about is that both would be express lanes. And that's based on, again, the goals of, minimizing new VMT and maximizing revenue that's available for transit. And as well, from Caltrans perspective, you have better traffic operations when you have multiple express lanes rather than just one express lane. So it's kind of, it achieves some of our goals and it achieves some of Caltrans goals.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think it should be analyzed, but I just wanted to make you aware of that history.
Thank you. No, that is really interesting to know. Yeah.
I worked for Caltrans at that time, and it was just ugly. It was just, people were furious in Southern California about that, and it didn't help. In the long run, it was a detour that didn't need to happen. But at any rate.
Thank you, Olin. Andy, you're next.
Thank you. So a couple of questions focusing on the transit specific aspects of this. So one, just in terms of the alternatives being looked at, is there anything we've talked about, like the managed lanes themselves and the potential of having two managed lanes in each direction, but in terms of like spots where the 42 and other transit lines get on and off the highway, is there a possibility of having like dedicated transit connections to the managed lanes, as opposed to like the 42 having to sit in traffic at Mace? Is that being looked at all? And then second, looking at the Caltrans aspect of this, as you know, and I also work at Caltrans and headquarters, and we're a ways away from the district folks that you all are dealing with, but we are working to like beef up our coordination with the districts and elevate transit more at that level. I mean, there are a number of new transit-focused planning positions there. They're funded by IIJA. So I'd be curious to hear just if you could shed some more light on. It sounded like you were receiving some pushback from the District 3 folks on kind of the transit-focused aspects of this project, and it could be that, I mean, some of that ties into the history that Olin was speaking to. But any light you could shed on that, definitely be interested to hear.
Yeah, in terms of your first question, the project does include transit signal priority at both for the ramps that are metered. So, for example, at Base Boulevard, right, there is a ramp meter there. This would add transit signal priority both to the ramp meter itself, so that the ramp meter would recognize when there's a transit vehicle in the queue, and then basically give a kind of green, flush all of the traffic on so that the bus is not sitting in the queue, as well as then doing traffic signal priority at the traffic lights adjacent to the on-ramps along the corridor. So those are things we pushed for that Caltrans is now including in the project description. So those will definitely help speed up the buses getting on the freeway, particularly at Mace, where we know there's a lot of congestion. In terms of the Caltrans headquarters has actually been extremely helpful in this project, in this process very early on, when we were kind of not making as much progress with Caltrans District 3 as we would like. We did bring in the headquarters folks, particularly from the Division of Planning and Sustainability, to help us. And they've been extremely helpful in terms of helping move the needle with Caltrans District 3. And I think it's safe to say that we wouldn't have gotten where we are had it not been for the involvement of staff from headquarters.
Thanks for the insight there.
Any other comments from members? I have one of my own, but I'm saving it for last. So I want to make sure everybody gets heard. Seeing none, I guess I'll bring up mine. As you know, we've got our advisory committee framework, and one of our very large bubbles is equity and social justice. And I notice people are talking about framing it in equity, but it always gets lost in the let's talk about transit, let's talk about planning, let's talk about second lanes, let's talk about sound walls. So I just want to make sure that on the 80 planning committee that we've got folks that will actually be able to speak to this. And I'm really talking about the cognitive bias that sneaks in and hijacks your equity conversation, and making sure that you've got some way in which we're going to be able to adjust for that. So we're not going to end up in the land of unintended consequences. And in particular, that's your people of color, people from marginalized neighborhoods, people who are disabled, and making sure that we're actually designing from the ground up for all of us. I often find that designing for the least of us allows us to design best for all of us. And really taking a moment to kind of be able to center your work around access and use. I realize clean air is the big one, and we all benefit from clean air, but I hate for our social justice and equity work to get lost in the discussion over other items.
I appreciate the comment and the reflection, and I want to offer kind of 3 points about how we're working on that. The first is as part of our agreement with Caltrans that the MOU that we signed with Caltrans around this project last fall in October. It does include expressly that toll revenues would be used for transit and for transportation equity projects in disadvantaged communities adjacent to the corridor. And that's primarily West Sacramento that we're talking about. The second thing is that of this $2 million that we're going after for SACOG for this tolling advanced planning process, it includes an equity framework, which would be kind of a way in which we're sort of integrating equity into all of the various steps, all the different components that we talked about, as well as designing that tolling equity program specifically. So both kind of an overarching equity framework, and then what does a specific equity program look like for this toll facility, both in terms of how, whether it's low income discounted tolls, and also the uses of toll revenue to invest in transportation equity projects. So that's the second point. And the third and final point is that I mentioned that there's 3 board members who are going to be serving on the ad hoc committee. One of them is Dr. Dante Early, who is a city council member from West Sacramento, who's made it clear that that's going to be a key priority for her with this project. And so we're really thrilled to have her serving on the committee.
I think Dante is a good addition. I would simply suggest that when you're going through your sort of information and bringing folks up to speed, that one of the things that you could bring people up to speed on is cognitive bias, and how it actually, no matter how well intentioned you are, if you aren't actually intentional and don't know what your biases are, that you will keep doing the same thing again. So I know I'm doing a lot of work with that with other boards and commissions and at the national level, but it is a really good opportunity to think about transit by taking those biases into consideration early and being able to kind of work to minimize those. And those are my comments. So I see Patrick followed by Steve.
Yeah, I was just curious if there was somewhere I could find some information or specifics on the programs in West Sacramento. that the funds will go to benefit.
Yeah, that's not yet developed. So that's just, we just have what's the, literally the one line in the agreement with Caltrans about how those revenues will be spent. So that's part of the scope of work. Like what we can share with you is the scope of work for the equity framework and the development of the equity program. So you'll see like what's the process by which we're planning to develop those. So that's something we can definitely share with you and with the whole committee if the committee's interested.
I think that would be great. Thank you for that. Stephen, you're up. Stephen, you're muted.
I don't know about City of West Sacramento, but City of Davis does have Americans with Disabilities Act Advisory Committee that I'm on, and Gloria Partita and others. So we haven't met for a while, but if that would be helpful to address what you're talking about, we could certainly arrange for that to happen. Kelly Stackwitz would be the coordinator.
Thank you.
Any last comments from members on this? This is a great presentation, by the way. I want to thank staff on that, and hopefully we will continue to get regularly updated and have the opportunity to weigh in, and look forward to seeing more about this. Gone for any
Madam
last
Chair,
comments?
I just
Okay,
have a
go.
request. If you could stay on, Autumn, after we close, just for 30 seconds, I would appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're just speaking to Autumn, not to the whole committee and staff?
Correct. It's I'm having a little computer problem, and I want to ask Autumn if she has someone on the staff who might take a few minutes tomorrow to.
No
help.
worries. I just wanted to make sure who was staying on and who was going.
It's a Zoom problem, and this is the only committee. Well, no, there's another one, but at any rate, I need a little assistance.
It's all good.
Good.
Stephen, you have a comment?
Yeah, just one. I will try to pay more attention to the chat, and when you left briefly, and if I miss it, I think you have my phone number. You could text me, and that could be a backup. But I'll keep the chat up in the future. So if you need to,
You were a great chair for those few minutes.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah, I was a silent chair.
That's usually the sign of a great chair. If there's nothing more on this item, we're going to move on into adjournment. I'd like to take a minute to thank the committee for electing me to be chair. It is always a very humbling experience to be trusted to help manage the conversation, and I really appreciate that and hope that I do you all justice. Thanks to staff, great meeting, really good information. I really enjoyed it. And if there are other comments, this is the time to make them. Otherwise, we're going to stand adjourned. Any other comments?
To Heather. Welcome to Heather.
Welcome to Heather.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, except for Olin and Autumn, the rest of us are adjourned. Have a great night, everybody.
Right.
Good night.
Right.
Good night.
Thank you. Good
Thank
night.
you, everyone.
Bye.
Autumn.
Yes.
This will just be very short, but I wanted to ask you, I've done some changes with my laptop and my monitor, and I have a webcam that works a lot better for me, but I can't get it hooked up. And I have an idea of what might be the problem, but I just need someone on the staff, maybe who's good on this kind of stuff, to maybe send me a Zoom invitation in the morning, and then let me see if I've corrected the problem.
Okay, I can ask our IT director. We have a 2-person IT team. I can reach out to them in the morning and see if one of them is available to do that with you. I think his name Chad McCula. I think he would love to. He loves to be helpful.
Okay.
And so if you can just what you could do is if you can send me an email, I can then to remind me. I will reach out to him in the morning and ask him to get in touch with you.
Great. Is email or text better for you?
Email is better.
Okay. Do you mind if I have your cell?
No, not at all.
Okay.
It's area code 510-851-1464.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Chad
no problem.
McCullough, and I'll send you an email right now.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, in the morning, I've got to pick up my son and take him to school and a few other things, but as soon as I get in the office, I'll ask Chad about it.
That's great. And I'll give you my phone number.
Okay,
If you don't already have, I'll give you my phone number and you can just pass that on to him, and
okay,
at his convenience, he can call me.
okay, sounds good, Olin.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck with it.
Good meeting.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.